Hey everyone, my name is Jax. In this video, we're going to be going over the major catastrophes in surviving the aftermath, as well as some tips and tricks on how to handle. Let's go ahead and lay out the 6 major catastrophes that can happen in this game. The first one is heat wave, then you have winter storm, a magnetic storm, a meteor shower, nuclear fallout, and a pandemic. Keep in mind this does not cover the smaller disasters that can happen, like rats eating your crops or lightning strikes. Let's go ahead and take a deep dive into each catastrophe individually. Let's go ahead and review the most common catastrophe, and that is winter storm. Let's go ahead and review the text that comes up when a catastrophe happens. And I know we can all read, we understand what's going on, but I want to emphasize a point here is that the text that pops up is actually very helpful. And I believe a lot of people might overlook it because it's so simple to overlook. It's so easy to just click that OK button and get back to the game. But let's just take a second and read what they're telling us here. So the first part, the first flakes of snow, morning, blah, blah, blah. Basically that first paragraph, that's just lore. That's just, you know, setting the stage of what's going to happen. It's cool, but it doesn't really give us much. It's the bullet points that say info and advice. That's the stuff that's really important to us. So reading it, what do we see? Burners keep shelters and workplaces warm inside their effective radius. Colonists exposed to freezing weather get cold. Cold turns into hypothermia, causing health loss. Close slow effects of exposure, upgraded ones even better. Crops and lakes eventually freeze, halting production. Animals and ranches can die without a heater nearby. So those are all really good points. So let's go ahead and look at the first one. Burners keep shelters and workplaces warm inside their effective radius. So what does that mean? Well, homes like this, they do need a heater. They need some sort of, you know, burner, or they need, even if you have it, if you have the research for it, a radiator. A radiator is good because it uses electricity and it doesn't use firewood. As you can see here, we are pretty low in firewood because we are in the thick of the storm. Not necessarily a great place to be. We should probably open up some more lumber yards to get more firewood, but that's a completely different discussion. In any case, ensure that you have burners and booster burners or radiators going, or industrial radiators. We don't have industrial radiators right now, but that is another option. And I also want to emphasize being efficient with your resources. Meaning, if we take a look at what's going on here, we can actually see a very efficient design. We have one boosted burner effectively covering 4, 8, 12, 16 houses. Arguably, we can also fit a few more here on these outer ones, you know, in this zone that's not red, but, you know, kind of opaque or, you know, white-ish. You're not going to get the full of heating effect, but, you know, you're not going to freeze, right? To me, this is a very good use of resources. We're using one burner, one boosted burner to cover this many houses. It's an extremely efficient use of your firewood. And so you don't have to build a ton of burners to cover a wide range of houses. In this case, we're just using one burner or even one radiator. I think I was actually getting ready because I was building a transformer here to actually replace this with a radiator because I was trying to get off my dependency of firewood. And that's another reason to shift over to radiators, is to get off dependency of firewood and just stick to energy. And in this case, I do believe that this is the design that I made. I don't know if anyone else has come up with it, but this is something that I've shared multiple times throughout the stream. But just to show you, basically, you place down a burner, then you build a road around that burner, and then from there you build a road halfway to the left, halfway to the right, and then from there you put a house in each corner, and from there you just build a house. You just add more houses to those corners of this house. Same thing for this, same thing for this, and then you just build roads around here, and then that's pretty much it. You just build an efficient housing block that's centered around a boosted burner. And it's perfect if you place these all over the map. So that way colonists can go to and from work easily. And also in here, you could place toilets too. You could put toilets in here so people can go to the restroom easily, or guard towers to protect your colonists a lot easier from, see, we're getting attacked up here. So it's a lot easier to protect your people. So we could just send someone over here to take care of this real quick. But super efficient design, probably doesn't look the best, right? Doesn't look the best, but it's going to make the most of your resources most efficiently, also with land usage. So you're saving efficiency on, electricity or firewood or whatever you're using, as well as land usage. So it's really nice. So that kind of covers the first 2 to 3 points, really. Burners keep shelters and workplaces warm in their effective radius. You're keeping colonists from getting cold and hypothermia. If they get hypothermia, they will die. So you don't want to get that. So you prevent cold and hypothermia by putting boosted burners. There are also some workplaces, because we only covered housing. You want to keep all your housing heated no matter what. You never want to leave any housing unheated. So you can also see we have another one right here. So we have multiple housing districts, but there are some buildings that do not operate without a heater. And I believe we have the upgraded version of this already. But let's see. I think you can actually read it in the description. So you can see here, it must be heated during winter storms. Cannot be placed by blah, blah. But the important thing here, especially for a winter storm, is that it must be heated during a winter storm. So with that being said, you can see we have another housing block here. It's not the most efficient because this is a prime example of a building that's a workplace that's not housing that needs to be heated during winter. So keep that in mind. There are some buildings that actually do not function without a heater. I believe a school is another one too. I'm not sure if, I think we have, oh yeah, we have some schools right here. So school is another example of that. So must be heated during winter storms, you can see right here. So make sure to keep, your schools heated, your fishing piers heated, and anything else. You just make sure that you're just reading, you're going through and you're reading what it says, like what it needs. So not all buildings need to be heated during winter storms, but only some. So just something to keep in mind. Another tip, and it's right here in the advice, clothes slow the effect of exposure. Upgraded ones, even better. So with that being said, we want to make sure that we have a steady supply of clothes. And how do we do that? By building tailors and grand tailors. If you can afford grand tailors, it's not a huge jump. It's really easy to actually get a grand tailor, and it's not a huge jump in resources. Compared to a tool shop, as you can see here, it only takes metal, but once you upgrade it, it actually takes parts. To me, that is a huge jump just to go from tools to durable tools. Now, durable tools obviously are better, all that good stuff, but to require parts are kind of hard to come by. Production isn't that good. I believe if you upgrade this, your parts production is going to just drop, or shouldn't say production, but your consumption is going to increase, thus making your parts storage drop tremendously. So I personally don't recommend it, but again, that's kind of outside the purview of this video. So I typically like to have a ton of brand tailors up and running to get at least, sturdy clothings, but basic clothing will also get the job done, but preferably sturdy clothing. Another thing too is protective clothing. You can't actually make protective clothing. The only way to get protective clothing is actually a scavenging outpost on the world map. Right here is a perfect example of scavenging outpost for protective clothing. You can tell it's protective clothing because it's got those 2 little green chevrons right there, and it also matches the protective clothing sign right there. However, it is in Kenville's sector, so we can't actually take this. But this is something you would want to get because protective clothing is great. Here, we could take over this one. This would be a perfect one to get. But protective clothing is going to end another one over here. Look at that. But try to get clothing as soon as possible. Clothing is great. It also makes your people feel a bit more comforted too. So moving on to the next point, crops and lakes eventually freeze, halting production. So crops like this, even if they're upgraded with irrigation like this, they don't function during a winter storm. And so as soon as you see a winter storm coming, the first thing you should be doing is immediately harvesting. And especially if you have emergency harvest researched, I believe emergency harvest is a ideology technology that's limited to survival ideology, but that is a good one to have just to for this case. When a winter storm comes, you immediately want to make sure you can harvest as much as you can, because it does take time to research, or sorry, it does take time to harvest. It's not an immediate thing, especially if your people aren't working. So as soon as you see that, immediately harvest. Even if you want to wait a little more just to get it to grow, no, just immediately harvest as soon as you can, just to get whatever you can, because it's gonna wither away otherwise. So you want to get as soon as you can. However, keep in mind, if you were heavily dependent on farming, like we have a pretty big farming setup here. If you are heavily dependent on farming, as you can see here, we have a lot of plant-based nutrition, but also a mixture of meat, fish, and venison, which is a good thing to have. You do want to have a mixture, but as you can see, we do have a considerable amount of plant-based nutrition. Now, during a winter storm, it probably won't last too long to actually mess us up, but this is also late game. So if you are in early game and you are actually struggling with this, and you say you don't have, what we have here, a large storage of fruits and vegetables and plant-based nutrition, you might want to have a backup of, like, say, a domed greenhouse. And keep in mind, this is also an end game building too, so you might want to stick to smaller greenhouses like this, so you can have at least some sort of production of plant-based nutrition. Greenhouses are not affected by winter storms, so that's the great thing about them. They can also grow unique foods in there, like the herbal plant, like as you can see that we were growing here. We're growing this thing, but it's used for herbal medicine. And lastly, the last point is animals and ranches can die without a heater nearby. So how we have ranches here, we want to keep these heated. So as you can see, we do have boosted burners that are near. They're not heated. These things will eventually die. The unfortunate part about this is that you actually have a very large investment in these animals when you buy them. So if we actually look at how much an animal actually costs, like say a cow, $440 or 440 silver for each one. That's a significant amount of money, especially early game. If we look at pigs, it's probably, something similar. Yeah, 412. As you can see, we invested a lot in these beetles because we wanted 770 each. That's each. So if we bought 3, that's a large amount of money. If you don't have a lot, I mean, we do have a lot because we're selling efficiently and all that good stuff. But if you don't have a lot of money, that's a huge investment. So you want to protect your investment. So make sure you heat your ranches with heaters, and don't let the money, just walk out. That's a really easy way of, like, letting your money go away. But just to kind of summarize things, make sure you are efficient with your resources when it comes to laying out your cities and settlements. So for every burner that we have, we also need to have an appropriate amount of production for firewood. And so by limiting the amount of firewood that we have to, consume, we basically have a maximum, or we're maximizing our efficiency of the firewood that we're using. So that way we don't have to employ as many logging camps to produce firewood. So it's in our best interest to be as efficient as we can with laying out our city and burners, as well as making sure that we take care of our people with tailors and clothing, and also putting burners where appropriate, such as ranches or schools, to make sure that they can operate efficiently, and same with fishing huts and other buildings. Just make sure you're reading the description of the building to make sure if it needs a burner or not. Up next, let's go ahead and talk about heat wave. It's very similar to winter storm, but it's literally just the opposite effect, where instead of everything being cold, everything's really hot. In this case, the colonists drink double the amount of water, crop yields on open fields suffer, build and fill water storages, and stockpiling food to survive. Colonists sweat, making hygiene harder. So looking at the first line, colonists drink the double the normal amount of water. So if you hover over here to your water storage, or sorry, if you hover over here to your water summary, you can actually see that the consumption in buildings is basically going to double. So we're going to want to make sure that whatever we're consuming, we want to produce double of that to cover ourselves in heat. Jumping to the third point, build and fill storages, I don't think that is a good point. I think it's okay early game, but anywhere beyond early game, it's not a viable option. And the reason for that is ultimately your water balance is what's important. If you all of a sudden double your consumption when, you know, if we're going to jump to negative, say 600 or 700 because everything doubles, it's going to eat through our storages like crazy. It's not going to be good. So that's why I say that balancing your water balance is key. You would have to build in an insane amount of water storage in order to compensate for it. Building a bunch of these clean water storage as well as a large clean water storage, it's going to take a lot more construction costs for the materials. Just build these. Just build these and upgrade these. These are the most broken building. This is the most broken building in the game, in my opinion. I have a water guide on this, and I will link it so you can see. But go ahead and check that out. I discuss all the water buildings. This water well is the most broken building in the game. You literally place it on the map and you forget about it. You click it, place it, forget, and it produces. There's no labor costs, super low construction costs. It's super simple, and the upgraded version is even better. You could place it on barren soil and it's still going to produce stuff. It's crazy. It's such a good building. But anyways, as soon as you see this, immediately harvest your crops as well, because your crops on open fields, at least, even if they're irrigated, are not going to produce. So as soon as you see it, click it, just get it out of the way so you don't forget. Now, if you have greenhouses, again, not affected, but make sure you do have some greenhouses so you can have a little bit of production of whatever you need. But please do not fall into the trap of building a bunch of storages and relying on that. It's just going to set you up for failure. Just balance your water appropriately, build the necessary water infrastructure, and just be done with it. Make sure that you have plenty of hygiene stations, specifically outhouses and toilets. Now, if you can't afford the toilets or you don't have it researched, that's fine. Just build a bunch of outhouses. As you can see here, this is actually a relic of like an old thing that I used to do early game, where I'll have the main path of travel and then I have a little offshoot with 2 outhouses right here. And the reason for that is because outhouses actually produce pollution when they're being used. So if they're producing pollution over here, it's not going to hit these people that are traveling up and down this road. But now that, you know, I've expanded, I've upgraded these, put the water tower here to toilets. They don't produce pollution, as you can see. Nothing's being produced by this. There's a bunch of pollution over here, but the key that I'm trying to, or the point I'm trying to make here is these aren't. But make sure that they're spread throughout your colony. You want to make sure, you know, especially at your housing locations, that you do have these. This is also really important because a lot of your colonists are actually going to stay in their houses throughout the day. So you can see these are being used a lot here. So it's very important. Just make sure it's spread throughout, because you don't want your people walking all over the map just to go to the bathroom. They're going to lose efficiency. You're not going to produce resources as quickly. You're making sure that your people can maximize their time to produce more stuff for you. That's what you're doing. Up next is Magnetic Storm. This one is also a short-lived catastrophe, but it can have pretty big impacts on your colony. Looking down the info and advice, energy production shuts down. Buildings producing or consuming energy might be damaged. Slight increase in radiation sickness cases. Build battery racks and charge them fully to keep the colony running. Unlock and build lightning rods to protect your energy producers and consumers. So the important thing here is energy production completely shuts down. So anything that's producing energy is immediately going to go away. And it tells you to build energy storage, you know, batteries, to help combat that. And that does make sense in certain cases. Like if you have some sort of critical infrastructure that you're trying to keep up and running 24/7, like if you're trying to produce more parts constantly, I get that. But then that involves you shutting down the consumers, respectively, to make sure that you're balancing your energy your energy consumption for these batteries, because you only get 6,000 energy units for a fully charged battery rack. And not only that, it's a huge investment. 25 parts, 50 concrete, 75 metal. I personally would rather be using the parts for something else, like building another wind turbine, because parts are a huge bottleneck in this game. And if I'm spending resources on battery racks, it's not helping me build more energy. It's only helping store energy. So I'd just rather wait out the storm and then build another energy producer so I can expand infrastructure than to build battery storage. So, but that's just my opinion. If you'd rather have storage, then go for it. But my advice to you, don't fall for the trap of storage. It's the same thing that applies to water. Don't fall for the trap of storage. Just build more production. That is a better answer than storage. As you can see, I have 0 storage. I have a little bit here, but I think that's from the colony center. Another tip is that it says energies or buildings producing or consuming energy might be damaged. Now, since it's very easy to protect these buildings with a lightning rod. Funny enough, look at that. Actually, the perfect timing. That just got damaged. Looked like it was either some sort of random lightning strike, but as you can see, all the damage that might have went to these buildings went to this now. And the cost to repair a lightning tower is far better than the cost to repair a large wind turbine or whatever it may be. Because it's going to take components to repair these, whereas this is going to take parts. So I'd rather pay the cost of parts than components, because I want to use my components for other things that are more important. So always make sure that you have at least a lightning tower or lightning rod protecting your energy producers. Huge it's basically an insurance policy. This is a huge insurance policy. Make sure you have these built around your producers, because you're investing a lot to these things anyways. Another tip is that buildings consuming energy might be damaged. So what does that mean? We can actually turn off these buildings and they're no longer consuming energy, thus meaning they cannot be damaged, right? Just turn them off. It's a very simple way of actually saving this building from being damaged. Just turn off all the buildings that are consuming energy. This is a lot easier early and mid game, but like in end game, like where we have a ton of buildings consuming energy, it's going to be a bit tedious to go through each one and click. I get it. It's a lot. But if you are trying to, make sure that nothing is damaged, it's something they have to do. You can do it. It's a way to save your building. So I would recommend that. A slight increase in radiation sickness cases, not a big deal. Again, just make sure that your medical tents are properly staffed, and that should be taking care of that. But the main thing here is to build the lightning towers and then turn off any buildings that are consuming energy. That's how you're going to get through this catastrophe very easily. Just turn off all these buildings, just turn them off, just boom, boom, boom. And then the rest is taken care of. Very easy. And then just turn them back on. Once the catastrophe is done, all you have to do is just turn them back on, and then you're good. So up next is Meteor Shower. These are kind of they're actually the short length one, also next to Magnetic Storm. This catastrophe is relatively short-lived. All it does is that it randomly has meteors just hit the map, especially on your buildings and people. Just have a bunch of construction resources ready to make sure you have the repairs, as well as enough carriers. And you can actually ensure that you have enough carriers by actually clicking your colony center right here and increasing the carrier count to whatever you desire. I personally like to have it at 1 because I like to have at least one person running around, repairing things, transporting resources, all that. But you can increase it to what you desire, but I think 1 is good enough. But during a meteor shower, maybe you want to bump it up to, 3 or 4, or whatever it may be. And another thing too is you could, and this is entirely up to you, I personally don't think it's worth it, but you can actually build a maintenance depot to automate repair and decontamination. I personally don't think it's worth it, and the reason for it is 1, it takes resources to make the building, 2, it takes up space, and 3, it takes labor to do. Now, it's very simple to literally just click a building and repair it. That's all you have to do. You don't need another building automatically doing it for you. It might make sense for a high damage area. Say if you have buildings that are constantly being attacked by blight monsters or whatever, that makes sense. But in this case, I don't think that they're worth it. I do think it's a bit of a trap because it's meant to hurt you. But in this case, I wouldn't recommend it. And then lastly, build better shelters to keep your colonists safe. I do think that tenements are going to last you for quite some time. If you see under community, you actually get tenements literally 3 researches into the game. 1, 2, 3. Whereas to get to 2-story house, which is, pretty much the best one in the game, aside from comfortable housing, which might have a higher happiness boost, but how much it is, not sure. But you have to research all these things which have increased research costs along the way just to get to this. So you're going to be at tenements for quite some time. Now, you could go to improved tenements just to get the happiness boost. If that makes sense to you, then go for it. But I do not think durability is worth it at all. It's very simple to just repair a building and be done with it. I don't think you need increased durability. I usually save these for last. I never find these worth it. I would avoid durability increases. But for building better buildings that have higher durability, such as this, the incentive should be to make sure that your people are happier and not because the durability is higher. It is a side effect of it. It's good that it has higher durability, but it shouldn't be the main reason that you're going to it. So let's talk about nuclear fallout. We actually have one happening right now, which is great. Harvest crops on open fields before they wither. As you can see, this is fully withered. It's disabled by a disaster. So we're a bit late, but we would want to harvest these as soon as we saw the, hey, nuclear fallout is happening. We want to harvest the ones that we could as soon as possible. So we're going to go ahead and do that. But again, ideally, you'd be doing it before any of this happened, but we're already a bit late for this. By this time, you would pretty much lose a considerable amount. So in a perfect scenario, we would have harvested this a long time ago. So crops on open fields are disabled, so these can no longer grow. But keep in mind, greenhouses are not affected, whether they're domed or regular. You want to keep these, you want to have at least some going because they are helpful to have production available. Stockpile iodine pills to treat radiation quickly, and build more medical facilities and assign more workers to existing ones to help those who are in need. The unfortunate part about this catastrophe, along with pandemic, is that these ones are game enders. Like these, if you are not prepared for these catastrophes, they can end games very easily, and it's very hard to come back from this if you don't know how to handle it properly. Especially because the key to solving this is a resource that you can't get readily available early or mid game. It happens late game, and it's a very small trickle of it unless you invest heavily into it. And what I mean by that is that you have to invest heavily into medicine production. It's all the way at the end, and it's 1,000 research points, which is already a huge investment in the first place, but along the way you have to research all these. And not only that, look at what's involved. So you have to get electronics to build it and concrete, which also have their own requirements in the first place. To even build this, to build circuit assembly, I have to go down this tree too. So it's twofold. This is a very large investment. And not only that, you also have to get the herbs for it too. You have to get the herb plant and then herbal medicine. So this is a very large investment. And it's not feasible for a lot of people. This is very hard to get. So the next best thing to do is to harvest these on the world map. Iodine pills here would be a perfect investment. If we saw the notification that's coming, I would immediately send a scavenger, specifically a scavenger, because they would get it quicker than most out here to start gathering these, because I need these as soon as possible. So always use your world map to try to scavenge the necessary resources that you need to combat this. Iodine pills for nuclear fallout, or antibiotics for a pandemic. I see a lot of people talk about this catastrophe, and it's very hard to combat. It's a very difficult catastrophe. This, along with pandemic, it's really hard to come back from. As you can see, 95 people irradiated. We have a significant amount of people that are becoming irradiated. It's going to be, we could lose a lot of those people. So it would be unfortunate for us to lose all those people. What I recommend is, I actually recommend, and this is not stated in the info and advice, but it's a huge help. It's to build survivor outposts. Survivor outposts are huge, and this applies to both, to all things. I would recommend building survivor outposts relatively early on, just to help you out, recover, survivors early on in the game, just to make sure that you don't fail your games. This can save you so easily, but especially for nuclear fallout and pandemic, these are vital. I typically build 2 or 3, and I'm specifically building them in the urban biome. And you can see on the bottom right, sector info, you see those 5 yellow circles under survivors. That means it influences the rate right here. So you can see we have 0.7 every 12 hours, and this is 0.6 every 12 hours. As you can see, they both have the same amount of survivor bubbles, both 5 yellow bubbles, whereas this one only has 2. You might only get 0.3 every 12 hours here. But you always want to put them where there's high survivor, specifically in urban. It's usually urban. You can tell it's urban by, like, you can see like these buildings that are here. But always put down a survivor outpost. Even if it's just one, just do yourself the favor, put down a survivor outpost. It's going to save you every single time. It's instrumental in saving your games, because these catastrophes, it's very easy to fail. It's super easy to fail. I've seen it many times with people. I see them on the forum saying, "Oh man, I had a nuclear fallout. It completely destroyed my run. I couldn't recover from it." Because think about it. If we lost 120 people, what is that going to do to our infrastructure, right? If we start losing people that can't farm, can't produce energy, can't produce water, what is that going to do to our base? It's basically just going to destroy the base's ability to keep itself together. It's going to destroy the colony, right? Because we're not going to be able to recover from that. Because now, how do we properly reallocate our resources? Unless you know how to micromanage and reallocate the people correctly to preserving critical infrastructure, it's going to be extremely hard to come back from that. If we lost that many people, it's very detrimental to games. And that's why a lot of people say pandemics and nuclear fallouts are game enders. So if you get this one early game, I'm sorry. It's really the luck of the draw. These are very hard to come back from, but you could do some things to help prevent it. So 1, make sure you get your iodine pills stockpiled, and also 2, build a bunch of medical tents and field hospitals. Field hospitals are a lot better, but there's a more investment for this. These aren't readily available early game. So that's why I'm saying just build the medical tents, and especially if you can, get the early game medical training. The medical training is huge because this increases healing speed. You can also, get nurses for the help of the additional work slot to make sure that someone is always healing someone. And the last catastrophe we have goes in line with the nuclear fallout is pandemic. Again, this is a game ender as well as fallout. They're pretty much the same thing, except the only difference is that one is cured with iodine pills and the other is cured with antibiotics. Again, the same thought applies here, where as soon as we see it, we want to send out scavengers to the world map to gather the respective materials. So in this case, if we saw a pandemic, we would want to send a scavenger out here to get these antibiotics if you aren't producing any at your base. Again, that only really applies to late game, because to produce these, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot to produce antibiotics. There's a huge amount of research involved just to produce those items. But you can do it. It is possible. So it just takes a very long time to get. It takes a huge investment, and you need all these different resources. You need oil, you need, herbal medicine. For oil, you have to, build sunflowers in order to harvest those. And then you might have to buy the seed for that. So again, there's just this long line of requirements just to build this one item, and you're only producing 2 of them. And you also have a huge amount of labor involved in energy. There's a long list of items needed just to produce a few of these things. So the key thing here is just build medical facilities all over the map. Make sure they're housed. Just build them all over so that people have access to them. So that way they can get healed easily. Just put them everywhere. So that way people are not having to stand in one spot or one part of the map in order to get healed. And that's it for Catastrophes for Surviving the Aftermath. What do you think? Did this guide help you? Did you learn anything new? You found this helpful? I greatly appreciate a like. It helps my channel. And if you want to see more content like this, I'd greatly appreciate a subscribe. Helps let me know that you want to see more stuff like this, and also helps the channel as well. So as always, I will see you next time and have a good one.